Every once in a while, a whiskey comes along with a story that's as interesting as what's in the glass. Two Brewers Release 49 is one of those bottles. Because this whiskey was finished in rum casks that the distillery didn't actually know the origin of when they first filled them. No distillery stamp, no producer name, no information at all. Eventually, they did track down the barrels to Barbados, but beyond that, the full story of those casks is still a bit of a mystery. There's a bit more to that story, which I'll tell in a little bit, but somehow that feels pretty fitting for Two Brewers, a distillery that's been quietly experimenting and pushing Canadian single malt forward for over a decade. So today, we are taking a closer look at Two Brewers Release 49, their first ever rum cask finish, and seeing how that mystery barrel experiment turned out. Before we get into the whiskey itself, though, it's worth talking about why Two Brewers has become such an interesting distillery in Canadian whiskey. They are based, if you haven't heard of them, in the Yukon, which already makes them fairly unique. But what really sets them apart is their background. This is a distillery built by brewers. That brewing mindset shows up in how they approach whiskey making. Instead of chasing a single house style, they release whiskies in numbered batches, each one exploring different ingredients, fermentation techniques, cask combinations, and you'll notice they have a few broad categories: classic, innovative, special finish, and peated. That experimental approach has been getting more and more recognition lately. At the Canadian Whiskey Awards this year, Two Brewers picked up, I think it was Excellence in Sustainability, and their Release 47 won Best Whiskey aged 9 to 15 years, which I think was a classic single malt. But let's talk about the rum casks behind Release 49, because this is where the story gets even more interesting. The team originally purchased rum barrels from a broker, and of course filled them with their whiskey. After letting the whiskey rest in those casks for a while, they sampled it, and the reaction, how was it Bob put it when I spoke to him? Underwhelming. So they decided to order more rum casks to try again, with different casks. He was set on seeing that idea of a rum cask finished through. So when the new shipment arrived, yet again, there was a surprise. No distiller stamp, no producer information, nothing that would tell them where the rum casks had actually come from. Eventually, after a bit of digging, they were able to trace those barrels back to Barbados. But that's about all anyone knows. I'm going to give this a pour and let it sit for a second. Another thing that makes Two Brewers really interesting to me is some of their brewing technique that they bring into whiskey. One of the most unusual parts of the process is their sour mash approach. Instead of using the typical sour mash technique you would see in bourbon, they actually do something closer to how you might make a sour beer. They start with a kettle mash, and then they add yogurt to the mash before fermentation. That yogurt introduces lactic bacteria, and the mash is allowed to sit for a few days. The first time they tried it, of course it was just an experiment, they were expecting the whiskey would be poured down the drain. But they found it created this brighter, more refreshing character in their whiskey. So it became part of their process in some of their batches, not all of them. There's also another small detail that's easy to miss. They include a tiny amount of peated malt in a lot of their mash bills. This one doesn't say on the label, so I guess we'll find out. I think I got some peat in there the other night when I was sampling it. But for me, those small kinds of technical choices are what gives Two Brewers its distinct character. All right, enough talking. Let's actually get into what is in this glass and see what Release 49 is all about. This is a single malt whiskey, part of their special finish line, and we're looking at 46% here. Okay. On the nose, it feels very much like a classic Two Brewers, quite soft. Something light and grainy. Definitely sweet. I get this baked sweetness like caramel, butterscotch. but there's that subtle cereal note in there too. Maybe something just a little green. Mostly though, it reminds me of like soft maple fudge. Okay. Cheers. On the palate, the whiskey really opens up. It's nutty to start. Walnuts with a sweetness like nougat. You know, I think it reminds me of a Snickers bar. Okay. Just the faintest smokiness. A whisper of peat, again, is really subtle in there. But you get this nice, creamy, buttery popcorn. The rum influence, if any, I think it's mostly on the nose. But there is this sort of candied sweetness here. The finish is medium to long, nicely warming. There's a lingering sort of malt sweetness. Something green here too, just like the nose, herbal. Maybe olives? That whisper of peat still here. Something sweet. It's not smoky, just a bit of a background note. The whiskey's quite complex. It's moving all over the place, and I love a good rum cask finished whiskey. But oddly, I'm not getting much rum here. If it's agricole rum, you might get sort of more of those green herbal notes, which we are getting. If it's Barbados rum, those are more often molasses based, something like Mount Gay, which would be sweeter, caramel sugar, big tropical flavors. But maybe that's the maple fudge on the nose? Either way, I think the rum influence is quite subdued. I am early in the bottle, so I'm keen to see how this opens up over the next few months. Now, if you're thinking about what to pair this with, I always love pairing whiskey with something. We have that Two Brewers bright malt character. I think pairing it with something like grilled pineapple with a little honey drizzle and some lime. It is springtime after all, or at least it is when I'm filming this. That sweet, slightly smoky fruit I think would line up beautifully with the whiskey's caramel and malt nose. And the acidity from the lime would brighten everything up. Another fun option, a warm slice of carrot cake. You get those baked notes, that sweetness, that sort of maple fudge, the cream cheese frosting, and that sort of malt caramel in the whiskey, I think would be fantastic. What I love about this release is that even though it is a finished in rum casks, it still feels unmistakably like Two Brewers. And honestly, the mystery barrel story just makes the whole thing more fun. This is Two Brewers Release 49, their first rum cask finish. And proof that sometimes a little mystery in the barrel can lead to something pretty interesting in the glass. Cheers.